I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's April 29th, 2025. Washington, D.C. loses its AAA bond rating. Why? And what are the consequences? Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich is withdrawing his proposed property tax increase and will instead propose raising the county income tax, which was newly allowed by the State General Assembly. One of the more esoteric parts of housing reform, American buildings of a particular size must have 2 stairways. Having one stairway reduces building costs, but also increases the margin of error on safety. The National Fire Prevention Association is thinking about the balance. And the bizarre story of the murder of 500,000 bees in Virginia. Stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Baltimore composer and woodwind player Seth Keibel. The songs come from his 2018 album Tiny Hands, Big Desk. Flo Anito on vocals, Christian Perez on guitar, Bob Abbott double bass, Tom Teasley on percussion, and Seth Keibel on the clarinet. Sound recording and engineering by Mike Harvey, Wes Lanich, and Steve Steckler.
Little group of states pulled the tiny levers for the big mouth guy and left us all with one huge colossal mistake. Dum, 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 dum. Tiny hands behind a great big desk, thin-skinned, immature, and self-obsessed. Tiny man full of fear and ire. Tiny hands might set the world on fire.
We start with Yashim Sain of the DC Policy Center on Washington's lowered bond rating.
Moody's lowered DC's bond rating from AAA to AA1, which is still an investment grade rating, which means the Moody's did not change its view that DC will be readily able to meet its debt obligations. The reason for the downgrade was kind of external. What's happening with the federal government's actions as well as the commercial property market. In the past, when DC went through a period of really bad bond ratings, it was largely a reflection of the city's ability to manage itself. This time, it has nothing to do with that. It doesn't mean that the city is spending its money badly or being irresponsible. All that means is conditions that are largely out of the district's control that has to do with sort of like the strong downtown activity that really lifted the city for a while, or the presence of the federal government, which has served as an anchor for the city. Both of those have weakened, and that's the reason why the bond rating has been downgraded.
The federal government has outsized influence on DC's budget and government operations, and the feds have acted chaotically under this administration. But speak to the real estate market problem.
It's largely commercial real estate, which means office buildings. Obviously, since the beginning of the pandemic, remote work has taken a very strong hold, not just in this city or in this region, but everywhere else. And over time, at the beginning, we've seen this largely in empty offices, but over time, as leases began to expire, the renewals have been weak, did not happen, or people just downsized, which reduced the net operating income for these office buildings. And essentially, the value of office buildings is a function of their net operating income, and that's a function of how much vacancy they have. If a building is full, the net operating incomes are higher, so the capitalized value of the building is also higher, so the tax revenue is higher. I think on the upside, one thing that I really keep reminding myself of is that the city has a rule that says that its debt service cannot be more than 12% of its expenditures. So if the tax revenue goes down and the expenditures go down, automatically translates into lower levels of borrowing.
But incredibly, the Washington Commanders have announced that they have a $3.2 billion stadium plan that is a public-private partnership. I'm sure, DC is going to have to pay into that.
Yeah, it's about $1.1 billion from the city. I was thinking about it today. Some of that is if we were to redevelop that area, we would have to make that investment anyways. It's just infrastructure. Whether it's a stadium or a library or whatever, you'll still have to bring the roads, the electricity, the infrastructure. I think, again, when I think about it, because of this 12% cap, if we're going to spend the $1.1 billion on this particular project, we're going to spend $1.1 billion less elsewhere. That might mean maybe no more school renovations or fewer libraries or fewer streetscaping.
So now one thing that the mayor, the council, and President Trump all agree is to bring workers back into offices. How's that working out?
It's a really good question. I mean, there's definitely more traffic. Castle data shows us that Castle, which is a company that runs these automated door fobs or keys, it shows that the presence of office workers in buildings have increased, but not by leaps and bounds. We were somewhere around a little bit under 50%, maybe we're like at 55%, something like this, compared to the pre-pandemic performance. So more workers are being forced to come to the office. And at the same time, a lot of workers have been offered the fork, shown out the door, has been told to never show up in the office again. So the net impact.
Now, the mayor has been trying to revive downtown for some time, even before President Trump came into office. Is that working out?
I mean, this is not something that's going to work out in a matter of week or months or even a year.
But when it's 2 years since she announced her first initiative.
So there has to be some sort of transformation. Nobody, not the mayor, not the president, has the ability to change people's demand for office. So the only thing that we can do is find alternative ways of using that office space, and also investing in public safety in downtown and other forms of revitalization.
What is the vacancy rate in office buildings in DC nowadays?
So vacancy rate is around 21% in downtown DC. Availability rate, which is what is vacant and what will soon be vacant, like expiring leases, is somewhere around 27%.
Now, what about office to home conversions?
There are some projects going on, some of them with the support from the DC government. I remember reading this one study by an architecture firm saying that in an average city, the share of office buildings that can be converted into residential is somewhere between 20 and 25%.
Even if you make regulatory changes, given the massive headwind of the commercial office space market and the federal restrictions on DC budgets, is there hope?
It'll be difficult. I think we have some bright spots in the city. We see single people moving into the city. Like household numbers are growing, even though population is not growing as fast. Those are largely young single renters who make between the ages of 25 and 34, make somewhere around 100K. So that's sort of like an opportunity zone, so to speak, because if they stay here, form families, they will add a lot to the skill pool in the district, but also the tax revenue. Keeping them here will require a lot of changes to our housing policies. I think sort of in some ways, in a perverse way, the district's regulatory regime is so restrictive that we can just make it a little bit unrestrictive and it will be like a huge tax break. So we've kind of really tightened things, and loosening them a little bit will generates lots of economic benefits.
Yashim saying thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Every morning when I wake up, I brew me some coffee, fill up my cup.
The Maryland General Assembly increased the cap on county income tax from 3.2% to 3.3% in the just ended legislative sessions. Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich sent a letter to the County Council President Kate Stewart saying that he plans to withdraw his proposed property tax increase, which had received considerable opposition from council members Andrew Friedson, Evan Glass, and Lori Ann Sales. Instead, Elrich is going to propose an increase in the income tax rate. The property tax increase would have netted $55 million, but the income tax rate is expected to bring in $70 million. County Council member Evan Glass, who has already announced a run for county executive, opposed the property tax hike. Friedson, who is expected to run as well, has opposed the property tax increase. Sales, who has in the past made common cause with the progressive wing of the council, was a surprise addition to those opposing the new taxes. Now that Elrich has said that he wants more income tax rather than property tax, council members will have to decide what to do. The Montgomery County Republican Party, led by twice county executive candidate Reardon Sullivan and forever candidate Robin Ficker, are building a referendum to freeze county spending. On the spending side, two new expenses that the state has shifted to local governments: teacher pension contributions and state property tax assessment contributions. Those will be going up.
Turn on the telly, flip to the news, a little bit anxious, I know it's no use.
The Maryland State Accountability and Implementation Board, the super state school board in charge of ensuring the implementation of the education law called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, has agreed to a waiver request from Carroll County Public Schools from meeting the minimum school funding requirements under the new law. The blueprint sets out county-level spending under certain categories. One key reason why Carroll County asked for the waiver from meeting the blueprint funding mandates is its compensatory education enrollment increased by over 80% between 2023 and 2024. Compensatory education services used to be make-up services for special education students, such as speech-language pathology or occupational therapy. When students miss these services, often due to staff shortage, the school district needs to make up the hours. English language learners are also given compensatory education services when they miss special instruction. Compensatory education services grew after COVID, and school districts funded the extra services with federal COVID relief funds. But it is unclear why Carroll County's compensatory education numbers would increase by over 80% between the years 2023 and 2024. In their waiver request, Carroll County Schools presented free and reduced meals data to support their claim to increase in compensatory education enrollment. This widens the meaning of what is understood by the term compensatory education to include poverty. Carroll County's free and reduced meals number, long a proxy for poverty, grew even faster than compensatory education enrollment by a whopping 86%. As perspective, Montgomery County's free and reduced meals number increased by 70% between 2023 and 2024. Queen Anne's County rose by 80%. The only Maryland jurisdiction to have dropped its free and reduced meals enrollment number turns out to be Baltimore City Public Schools. The drop was small, 2%, but it is astonishing to see a drop in Baltimore's school poverty rate, but dramatic increases in Montgomery, Carroll, and elsewhere. One of the more arcane elements of housing reform is to allow buildings of a certain size to be built with only one stairway. Fire safety rules and building code has for some time required 2 stairways. The Maryland General Assembly this year passed a bill to study the issue. The National Fire Prevention Association has been investigating. This is Jonathan Hart, the staff liaison for the team looking at building code changes.
The current code requirement that has been in effect really since about the 1970s, with some modifications in the 90s, from the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, our life safety code, which is NFPA 101, has allowed 4-story residential buildings of a certain size, of a certain blueprint, only 4 units per story, the max of 4 units per story, to have a single exit stair. The International Building Code, which is also widely used across the United States, has limited that to 3 stories. If we want anything higher than 4 stories or anything larger, footprint-wise than 10,000 square feet or 4 units per floor, we require 2 exits. The push right now is for an increase in height to 6 stories. 2 ways out of a building is a fundamental idea, fundamental principle of fire protection and life safety.
Does that require sprinklers currently? Or do you allow single stair and no sprinklers?
Right now, that would require sprinklers.
In Washington, D.C., it's the Gladstone, Howard and Cooperative, Clean Gardens, Harbor Square were built during the time the 2 exit was the standard code. Do the places where there are these kinds of buildings and the places that have enforced the code to have 2 stairways, do their fire outcomes differ?
We have not been provided data that you can tell. There's a few different aspects here. There's the specific U.S. cities where I think we would be able to get a better measurement. We've talked to the city of Seattle has allowed single exit up to 6 stories, I believe, but they've never tracked that information. One of the arguments that proponents make is that single exits are allowed in other countries. They point to a lot of different places in Europe, and Europe's a little bit different because they tend to design their buildings a lot differently. They're much more compartmentalized. They have heavier levels of construction. Asia is very similar. There's some allowances to go pretty high, I think even up to 18 stories with a single exit.
Consider some place like Japan, which was entirely rebuilt after World War II. Almost the entire country has newer buildings than Europe. They have single stair exit buildings that are higher. And Japanese fire codes, by my understanding, are fairly stringent.
Japan's not one of the ones that we had present at the workshop and truly dove into, but that is, that's part of the discussion is we should be looking at other places in the world. Both Australia and England, both countries are going backwards in what they allow. They're drastically lowering the height.
Have you seen appetite among the advocates of single exit buildings for introducing heavier construction materials in order to offset fire concerns?
And not so much heavier like we're talking in Europe. I think some of the original proposals when proponents of this brought this, when they first came in, one of the things they were looking to allow was, I believe it was even type 5 construction, which is our lightweight wood construction that you see, in many of the apartment buildings now. And that was one of the big points that, the opponents could point to and say, no, lightweight wood, that terrifies us. And so I think just as part of, even in that workshop discussion, it was, we can just take that out. We can require it be type 1 or type 2, which is our non-combustible construction.
What about developers? Did they balk at that?
I imagine they would. That would be quite an increase in cost for them. When you're talking about infill lots, I don't know. I mean, it will increase the cost, certainly, to go either steel or like poured concrete.
Jonathan Hart, thank you for taking the time to explain single stair exit building.
It's out of control. Each day new disasters. It's taking a toll. Sailors are grasping. I'm tied to the ship.
In In Stafford, Virginia, a murder of bees, 500,000 of them. Jerry Mariacho is the owner of Rock Hill Honeybee Farms, a commercial apiary.
We had just started 60 new colonies on the property here in Stafford on April 7th. On April 13th, I went, a Sunday afternoon, I went looking at my property. I walked the property and I noticed that the back gate was locked with a heavy gauge steel lock and a heavy gauge chain. I went and got a pair of bolt cutters, tried to cut it, couldn't cut it. So I decided we're going to wait till Monday when my team was here and we would come out with a cutting wheel and a generator and cut it.
And this is your own property, right?
It's my own property, yeah.
And somebody had come and put a lock on it.
That is correct. And this is now the fourth time that's happened. And we don't know who keeps doing it, but for some reason they keep doing it. So I basically went and I came back and I looked at the bees. Everything looked fine. I didn't see anything unusual. And Monday we did some stuff, and right about noon we went out and cut the lock. One of my guys then walks up to me and says, "Hey, Jerry, we need to go look at the bees because there's something wrong." And we walked over, and box after box after box, huge amounts of dead bees in the front. I looked at him. I literally got down on my knees looking at him, and I could see that the tongues of the bees were protruding excessively. It's called the proboscis. That's the tongue of the bee, and it was extended. I mean, it probably as far as it could go. I recognized that as a sign of pesticide kill. And then we started opening up boxes, and there's dead bees on the inside as well on some of the boxes. I told one of my guys, I said, head up the hill, because we had another set of bees up there. I said, head up the hill, take a look at them and see if they are in the same condition or if there's anything wrong. He comes rushing back saying every one of them, every single box has the same thing.
So somebody had sprayed your colonies with pesticide?
That is correct.
And in this process, people are locking up gates. What is going on here in Stafford?
What we're dealing with here is somebody who does not like the fact that I have a business that I'm running on my property and wants to interfere with it.
How large is your property?
5 acres here.
So you'd have to make an effort in order to get on your property, get to the colonies, and then spray them with pesticide. It's not like you're walking down a path and you go, the colony is right next to the fence and I'm just going to spray it. That's not what it is.
No, you would have had to walk way onto the property.
How many bees did you lose?
52 colonies of bees were killed.
And you have a total of 1,200 colonies, 1,100 colonies?
1,100.
How many bees did you lose?
Total of 52 colonies.
52 out of 1,100 that you own.
Right.
What is the total number of bees?
We estimated about 500,000 bees were killed.
Do you have an estimate for dollar value of the damage?
Yeah, almost $20,000.
What is the police saying?
The police are investigating, no leads. There's $7,500 reward out currently.
Well, have you thought about putting a camera?
Yeah, we do have cameras. And that's the thing. We had cameras up. And the one that could have done really good, the battery was dead. The other ones we called Cuddy back. It was the camera system that we have. And we called them. We said, hey, how come no pictures were developed of the people there? I mean, I've got pictures of deer walking on the property. You know, what happened here? And they told us that we had the wrong cameras.
Are there any other security measures you're planning?
Not right now that I can talk about. But
Jerry Mariaggio, thank you for taking the time. I'm sorry this happened.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities of Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home.
to us mortals with all of our flaws. Children and hearts in cages.
Music for this episode comes from Baltimore composer and woodwind player Seth Keibel. The songs come from his 2018 album called Tiny Hands, Big Desk. Flo Anito on vocals, Christian Perez on guitar, Bob Abbott, double bass, Tom Teasley, percussion, and Seth Keibel on the clarinet. Sound recording and engineering by Mike Harvey, Wes Lanich, and Steve Steckler. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
This is not our United States. This is not my motherland.